Hello, welcome to Upskill by Cultivate Mankato. Our topic on this video is going to be school readiness, looking at the developmental area of physical. I did take some of my information from the link provided, as well as a lot of the information just comes along with years of experience in school readiness programs and working with kindergarten teachers on the skills that are important for kindergarten. When we talk about physical development, what is it and how does it help us? So there's two different main categories that fall under physical development. The first one is fine motor development. These are the skills that are for small muscles. So if we think small muscles, we a lot of times will talk about those being in our hands. So they're going to be the ones that are going to help us be able to do very small, intricate things with our hands, using the scissors, the pencil, stringing beads, tying our shoes, doing things with Play-Doh and clay, things like that. For gross motor development, those are going to be what we call the large muscles or big muscles. And those are going to be for jumping and throwing, climbing, skipping, and kicking. Some of the different specific things under each fine motor and gross motor developmental area is running and galloping. So I put run and gallop, and we could even add part of it to be skipping within there, because that is a progression that the children will go through with that type of movement when we talk about running. So they'll be able to run, and then they'll slowly be able to gallop, and then they'll move into skipping. Another one is jumping. So one of the key things that we're looking for when we talk about jumping is if they're able to jump with both feet going up in the air and then back down. So a way to check this is maybe having them try to jump over something. And are they able to take both feet off the ground at the same time and jump over it? Hopping on one foot. Being able to do this 5, maybe 6, 10 times on each foot is good. Now you will notice a difference that one foot is going to be dominant over the other. So being able to practice on both is really good for their development, that they are getting work on both sides of their body. And then climbing will be another one. This one we most often see this with stairs. And so you might see a progression with the physical development of doing stairs by first maybe crawling up the stairs, then doing one step at a time as they do each foot. That might be another one. And then eventually what you'll see is them being able to go 1 foot per 1 step. So that's kind of progression that we talk about with climbing. And then we talk about bouncing, throwing, and catching. So with this one, the one thing that I just wanted to note with it is that maybe for throwing, your progression might be an underhand throw or toss is what they might start with, and then they're eventually doing overhand. And again, you're going to see this come easier with a dominant hand or leg, whatever it be, but it's good to practice with both and encourage them to practice with both, because all it's doing is just helping the muscles on both sides of their body and making the connections with their muscles and their brain. And then for catching, a progression that we might see with this is that at first they're going to what we call trap the ball. So it's actually going to hit their body, and they're going to use their arms to trap it against their body as a catch. So that would be what you might see with your child at first. And then from there, they'll eventually be able to catch it with both their hands instead of using their body to do it. Moving on to fine motor development. What we are going to look at here is I'll kind of go back and forth between some slides to show you some examples, which I think is very helpful. First, we're going to talk about pencil control or the grip. The progression with this is right here. All right, so what we're going to see, and again, with the research with this and what I hear, these are going to be approximate times of that progression. Even if we don't put a year next to them, it's kind of nice to see how that progression from one form of holding a utensil to another is going to happen. So a lot of you might see your child with the fist grip, and that is okay, or even the upside down, as you can see. Now, what we want to be able to tell is the more they practice, does it eventually turn more to what we call a tripod grasp? So that's what we want in the end. When we talk about school readiness and moving on to kindergarten, is we hope that they're going to be at that point of this tripod grip there. For anything else with this, Some people ask, well, about correcting it and getting them and supporting them and doing it. A lot of it is really just practice. And the more fine motor that they work on, the more those muscles are going to develop, the more they have time to draw or color. And even if they're not like to draw and color, kids, doing anything else with fine motor is going to be helpful as well. Now let's go back to talk a little bit about hand choice. This is popular as well, especially when we get to that entering the school year or kindergarten. So what I have learned over the years and been told is that there are going to be kids that are still trying to decide their dominant hand. Kindergarten, if not even beyond, sometimes you might see it. So the suggestion is to not have them or tell them that they need to use a certain hand, or you be the one to decide to switch their hand. The most success I have seen with this is when I see a child that typically is doing things with their right hand, especially I'm talking about the children that are in preschool and maybe that year before kindergarten. When I see them that are typically right-handed doing things, and then all of a sudden I see them trying with the left, which is great for them to experiment and to try and to build those skills. Instead of saying, oh, you should use your other hand and just tell them to switch, I will talk to them about how that feels. So as they're doing it, I will say to something to the extent of, how does that feel when you're doing that? Does it feel harder than the other side or better? And, maybe I'll even say, switch to the other hand and see how that feels. So I am just facilitating them, trying to be aware of their own body and how things feel. And usually, again, after using their left for a little while and trying to cut, if it be that's the example, they'll say, oh, that feels harder, or I don't feel like it's as easy. So try the other hand. Oh, that's easier. So then it's just more of kind of a natural way to do it. Again, it doesn't hurt for them to practice that a little bit and build those muscles in both hands. For the scissors. Oh, I didn't have that one on here. With that, the number one thing to, when your children are using scissors, if you allow them to use scissors, I totally understand that sometimes that's a scary thing to have in your house. But if you are using them and observing your child with the scissors, what the number one thing that I try to watch for is that they're not doing upside down. So if you could at least just correct that, that's really good. If you do have a scissors with a bigger hole and a smaller hole, encouraging them to put their thumb in the smaller hole and their fingers. And again, every child is see a little bit different, whether they want to put 2 fingers in that hole or 3 in the bigger hole. So just again, kind of facilitating conversation with it. And I would just say you definitely can correct, just trying to get them to turn it over. I have done it before where the scissors, I will put a little smiley face on the top where their thumb will be, and the smiley face facing them. So then they know when they have it the right way. Because again, sometimes their body doesn't know, right? We've used scissors long enough that our body has a body memory. So we know how it should feel, and things feel awkward when it's not being done the same way. But them, they don't have that. So that is a nice way to help them independently know if they have the scissors the right way or not. Progression with the scissors, you're going to see your child at first snip. So they're just going to be opening and closing it, not being able to follow a line or anything like that. They're just going to sit and snip. Then eventually you're going to see that they can start to follow a line. Then we want them to start to follow a curved line and eventually get to the point where they're cutting things out. For school readiness, if we're talking about children getting ready to go into kindergarten, being able to cut along a curved line or a zigzag line is very good. If they are able to cut things out, they are right where they need to be. But the younger age, when we talk about a preschool age, like the 3-year-olds, they're just at that snipping point and working on that. They're also going to be able to, in the fine motor area, be able to copy basic shapes. For writing letters, there is a progression with this as well. So I thought this was a really nice way to look at it. The first things you're going to see is they are just going to scribble, and that is just fine. Then you're going to see a little progression with that. Then all of a sudden you're going to see like this wave. So this is them imitating, because they see people write and it goes across and they're making those connections. The next one is called a letter-like form or mock letters. So they're not actually letters, but what they know is that they are taking lines or curves and connecting them. So they start to understand that instead of just going and scribbling or drawing some wavy lines, they're taking strings of things that look like it or creating shapes that look like letters. Then we let it move on to letter strings. So now they're starting, as you can see, to look more like letters, but again, no connection to making a word or sounds with it. And then we're going to move on to some of the further ones where they actually start to write words. So these later ones, as you can see, are definitely more where they are making the letters, and then it's just starting to form actual words that they're putting together. Some things also to point out when we talk about writing is the practicing writing their name is really a big thing. And I have heard from kindergarten teachers over the years that the biggest struggle or challenge for them with names is when a child has been taught to write their name early on. So maybe it is all capital or some capital, some lowercase, or maybe the formation isn't just quite right according to the font, which that's when it gets tricky. So depending on if you know the font that your school, that your child's going to is using, you could start right from the beginning of learning their name and teaching them their name. So what they see is these habits that are created very early on. So when they get to kindergarten and now all of a sudden they need to be just doing the capital letter for the first letter and then the rest lowercase, but their child comes in saying, you know, excited because they can write their name, which they can, but maybe it's an all capital. So then the teacher needs to go and try to reteach them how to do those in lowercase. So just something to think about. It is very exciting when children, especially in preschool, can already write their name. But something to be aware of is making sure that they are doing it the correct way, with the first letter being capital and the rest lowercase. As well as going left to right, you're going to see that as they are first learning how to write, you're going to see it, or maybe even the letters are kind of jumbled throughout the whole page. Those are all okay things in their development to be seen. We want to see once they get to kindergarten that those things kind of work out better. There's lots of fun things that you could do to help them learn, from, you know, helping them understand from left to right on the paper, from up to down on the paper. Really a lot what we want is just them working on different strokes. So just making a wave, making zigzags, making slants, making lines. Those are really what we want to be focused on right now. So then once they do get to kindergarten, they already have the idea and the skill of making different strokes to be able to make the letters that their kindergarten teacher teaches them. And then the last one in fine motor development, which is really good, is the putting together simple puzzles, if they're able to do that. And the reason the puzzles is in there is because they're really small pieces. So it works on a pincer grip that we call this. And so for them to be able to pick up a small puzzle or puzzle piece is really good, because then they have those little muscles going. So what can you do to help? So again, parents are always asking, and that's why you're watching this video, is what can you do? So you want to understand your child's development and figure out how you can help them. One thing that I have, again, from starting in working with early childhood years, is just being knowledgeable, especially now with technology and everything is texting and being typed up. Take time to write in front of your child if you don't already. If you are someone that maybe still writes out bills, checks, maybe you still write in a calendar, a planner, things like that, try to be conscious of how often you actually write in front of your child. So it's just exposing them to that and seeing how that's done. Be intentional with slotting time for your child to do these activities. We're really good about making sure they get outside and they get the large motor, but just being intentional with, have you taken some time to do fine motor things? And again, that doesn't mean that you need to force your child to sit down and do worksheets or to draw or to color. That is not at all what we need to be doing. Anything fine motor. And we'll talk about some specific ideas coming up. And then again, we talked about this a little bit earlier with the names. Practice their name using the correct formation of the uppercase and lowercase letters. And of course, spending plenty of time outside or doing large motor movements. So here are some few specific ideas that you can do to help with physical development. I did put purposely a lot of different fine motor activities in here, because I know that sometimes is more of the ideas that parents need. So sand play, being able to do that and having them play. And again, we don't just mean bring your child to sand and let them play. which is great because they can still pick it up with their hands and they're using those muscles, but giving them some tools to do that with buckets, scoopers, things like that. Threading and lacing. So maybe if your child is not into coloring or writing, anything with threading or lacing, eyedropper play. So this is really fun and you can get eyedroppers anywhere, and being able to just let them, again, instead of, if your child is not one to pick up a pencil or a marker or anything like that to practice fine motor, maybe it'd be more fun if they're transferring water from one thing to the other, or putting that in your bath for them to play with, which is one of the other things that we talk about coming up is bath play. So you can put a lot of different things in there, again, for them to move things back and forth and to play in the water. And building with blocks and Legos. I know we have lots of kiddos that love doing that. So the only thing to think about is what is appropriate for the size of the block or the Lego. When they are younger, you're going to want bigger ones because they're not able to get those really small ones. But once they get closer to that school readiness in kindergarten, you are going to want them to be able to pick up those smaller ones. And then using tongs and tweezers is really fun way to do that. So just being creative. And if you have these things like eyedroppers, tongs, and tweezers at home, you'd probably be amazed at what they can figure out what to do with them, or let them figure out what they want to do with it, even if it's going out and playing in the sand or playing in the dirt, whatever it might be. As long as they are using those utensils, because it's helping with that pincer grip and work those muscles. Play-Doh, of course, is awesome. As you can imagine, they're squeezing and molding, and that's really working on those muscles. And then cutting, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. If scissors scare you, you can use Play-Doh scissors to practice cutting. So if you have Play-Doh and they're just plastic scissors, you can Google Play-Doh scissors. So they won't cut anything, but they can still practice the same motion, and they're still able to practice using that scissors, but in a safer way other than the sharp scissors. And again, puzzles, and then drawing, coloring, and painting. What I encourage with the drawing, coloring, and painting is many different types of painting and different mediums. Do a variety. Don't just always have markers out or crayons. Maybe try some chalk or finger paints, even charcoal. Get creative and let them try some different things. Brush painting. So as you're drawing and coloring, to keep them engaged with it and excited about it. If your child has a hard time staying engaged, by introducing different types of medium and different utensils, that's going to keep them more engaged in what they can do. Some children also, it's harder for them to get just one small piece of paper and color on it. Sometimes they're more excited if you can get a whole roll of paper, and then they can get big and kind of lay all over it and color on the ground. Standing up, it's very good. Easels are very good practice for the shoulder muscle and connecting that. So that also is why they encourage easels, or maybe you can just put it on the wall if you'd like that, a big piece of paper, whatever works. So being able to have that motion where their hand is a little bit more up and drawing like that rather than down, resting on the table, is going to help build some of those muscles again throughout there. So that concludes our upscale video and our physical development for school readiness. Thank you.